The cost of quiet. People said Emeka was the kind of man who built things properly. Not because he talked about it. He didn't. But you could see it in the way he moved, unhurried, deliberate, like a man who had already thought 3 steps ahead and decided none of them required noise. By 38, he had 2 distribution lines, building materials, household goods, the kind of businesses that don't make you famous but make you free. Cash that kept moving, contracts that renewed without chasing. He had land in 2 states and a house he had finished before he put a single piece of furniture inside, just to be sure. Structure first, always structure first. That was his way. He met Tenny at a client dinner he almost didn't attend. She was arguing with someone across the table, not loudly, but precisely the way a surgeon works. When the other person conceded the point, she didn't smile. She just moved on, like winning wasn't the interesting part. He watched her for the rest of the evening before she noticed him watching. "You haven't said anything all night," she said. "I was listening." She looked at him like that was the most honest answer she'd heard in a long time. Her name was Tenny, consultant, the kind of mind that saw inefficiency the way other people see color. Immediately, everywhere, impossible to ignore. She wasn't soft with him, which he liked. She didn't perform wonder at what he'd built. She just looked at it clearly and said, "There's room to go further here." He respected that. He had built everything alone, and sometimes the loneliness of that was less about people and more about having no one to think alongside. She became that. For a while, she was exactly that. Marriage suited them. That is the part of this story that matters most, and it is the part that makes everything else complicated. She was a good woman, not perfect, but real. She cooked on Sundays even when she didn't have to. She remembered things he mentioned once and never repeated. When his mother was sick, she drove 3 hours without being asked, sat by the bed, held the old woman's hand, and never once made him feel like it was a sacrifice. He loved her, fully, the way a man loves when he is old enough to know the difference between wanting someone and choosing them. And she loved him. He never doubted that part. The problem was never love. It was gradual, the way all true things are. The questions that sharpened into suggestions, the suggestions that sharpened into directions. The directions said so naturally, so confidently, that he would hear himself nodding before he'd finished processing the sentence. "You're leaving margin on the table. That vendor relationship has run its course. You need to stop thinking like a sole trader." He won't lie. She was often right. That was the difficult part. It is easy to resist bad advice. It is much harder to resist good advice delivered in a voice that slowly starts to sound like the only reasonable voice in the room. He involved her. Small decisions first, then less small ones. She moved through his business with the ease of someone who had always belonged there. His staff brought her problems. She used his systems, his numbers, his relationships, and she was sharp with all of them. There was a version of it that looked exactly like partnership. He held on to that version, long after it had stopped being accurate. The meeting was a senior staff review, his own. He was 3 sentences into outlining a new direction when she interrupted him. Quiet, precise. "I think we should approach it differently." The room shifted. He felt it, the particular stillness of people waiting to see what a man does when his authority is publicly questioned by the woman he goes home to. He held her gaze, finished the meeting, was professional, was steady. But on the drive home, sitting in traffic, he wasn't thinking about the meeting. He was thinking about the property document, the one with her name on it, signed before they were married, signed because she had caught his hesitation and held it up like evidence. He was thinking about how many times he had swallowed a feeling and called it patience, how many decisions he had explained, justified in his own office to his own wife. He had been shrinking. Not dramatically, not all at once, but shrinking the way a man shrinks when he keeps adjusting to fit a space that keeps getting smaller. And the worst part, the part that sat with him all the way home, was that she didn't know she was doing it. He was almost certain of that. Tenny wasn't cruel. She wasn't calculating.
She was just a woman who was very good at being in charge, and he had handed her the keys to a room she had no business running. That was on him. He had let it happen. He didn't confront her that night. Instead, he sat with it for 2 weeks, turned it over, looked at it from every angle the way he looked at any problem that mattered, without rushing, without ego, trying to find the actual shape of the thing. And the shape of it was this. He had 2 things, a marriage and a business. Both were real, both mattered, but he had been running them as one thing, and they had different rules, and mixing the rules was destroying both. A marriage runs on grace, on softness when you don't feel soft, on letting certain things go because the person is worth more than the argument. Emeka was good at that. He had always been good at that. A business runs on clarity, on hierarchy, on one person being the last word in the room. You cannot run a business on grace, it will eat you alive, and you cannot run a marriage on hierarchy, it will hollow it out. He had confused them. He had brought marriage rules into the business and wondered why she kept expanding. He had brought business dynamics into the home and wondered why everything felt like a negotiation. He needed to separate them completely. He started quietly. He didn't call a meeting, didn't make a speech. He simply began to restructure, slowly, methodically, the way he built everything. He hired an operations manager, a man named Chidi, experienced, direct, with enough authority that there was now a clear buffer between the business and home. Decisions that used to float between him and Tenny now had a proper channel. He redirected the staff gently but firmly back to that channel. He stopped bringing work home in the way he used to, not all of it, but the kind that had become her territory. The conversations that used to happen over dinner about vendors and margins and quarterly direction, he moved back to the office where they belonged. When she brought something up at home, he would listen, nod, and say, "Let me look at that tomorrow." Not dismissive, just boundaried. She noticed, of course. She noticed. She was sharp. There was a week where the atmosphere in the house was careful, where she watched him with a look she recognized as her trying to understand a problem she hadn't named. Then one evening she said it. "You've pulled back from the business, from involving me." He looked at her, and he had prepared for this, not a script, but a truth, something clear enough to hold. "I have," he said, "not from you, from mixing 2 things that don't mix." She was quiet. "You are good at what you do," she said. "You're a consultant. You see things I don't see. But when you do it in my office, in front of my staff, I stop being your husband and start being a problem you are solving. And I don't want to be your problem, Tenny. I want to be your husband." A long silence. She looked at him and he watched something move across her face that she didn't quite manage to hide. Something that might have been recognition, might have been relief. "You could have just said that," she said finally. Her voice was quieter than usual. "I know. I should have said it earlier." She looked away, then back. "I didn't realize I was doing it. I know. That's why I'm telling you now, instead of resenting you for it later." It wasn't one conversation. It never is. There were weeks of adjustment, moments where she reached for the old dynamic and found it gently, consistently unavailable. Moments where he had to hold the line without making her feel punished for crossing it. It required the same patience he brought to everything he built. But something began to breathe again. At home, she relaxed in a way he hadn't seen since the early days. Without the business between them, there was just them. The woman who drove 3 hours for his mother, who laughed at things other people missed, who still, on Sunday mornings, cooked like it was an act of love, because for her it was. He fell back into her properly. And she, freed from a role she had never officially been given but had grown into by default, seemed lighter too, like she had put something down she hadn't realized she was carrying. One evening, months later, she said, "I think I was trying to make myself necessary." He looked at her. "You are already that," she said. "You just didn't know it." She didn't say anything to that, but she reached over and held his hand, and for a while they just sat there, the house quiet, the business somewhere else entirely, where it belonged. He never regretted keeping her. Some men would have left. He understood why, but leaving felt like a man who burns his house down because one room had a problem. He had built things his whole life. He knew the difference between a structure worth saving and one that had to go. The marriage was worth saving, so he fixed what was broken, protected what wasn't, and chose her again, clearly, on purpose, with both eyes open. That, he thought, was what it actually meant to build something properly.